First, congratulations to the President and the Minister of Transport and the Minister of Labour for setting up this meeting and giving us the opportunity to bring the international view to such significant guests. I'm the General Secretary of the International Transport Workers. We represent approximately 20 million transport workers from all the modes. I believe we're here to celebrate what was historically Cabotage Day, but I know over the last 20 years, significant investment has gone into the Turkish maritime infrastructure, and today we're looking not just at cabotage, which we believe is a fundamental pillar of building a sustainable shipping industry, but it's also about how do we improve the Turkish environment for the workers, for the employers, and together with the government. And again, it would be remiss of me not to recognise we're at a very troubled time in the world, and particularly in this region with the war, the Russian war against Ukraine, and the challenges that's creating for you as a very close neighbour, but also for all of our economies in the global position. So perhaps I should tell you a little bit about the ITF, who we are. So we're a global trade union. There are 9 global trade unions in the world, and we cover specific sectors. Obviously, we cover transportation, and we have national unions, over 700 national unions from 150 countries around the world. Our job is to represent the wishes of those transport workers, but in order to do that, we have to build long-term relationships with governments, UN agencies, and other significant players. Part of our challenge, which I will talk about, is how to make seafaring a sustainable career and look for opportunities for workers. But we also have to look, and I'm very proud to say, Turkey has a very young population of highly educated people for young workers. And of course, we have to be very frank, transport isn't the most attractive environment for women workers, and that's something that the ITF is determined to respond to. Our Turkish membership, 2 of our affiliates are in the room today, but we have 8 unions across all of the modes who are operating in the ITF as your voice to the global labour movement. Excuse me. So why do we exist and what exactly do we do? So you're very much part of the global society, and it's our job to ensure that transport workers are represented in all the international fora. But we have relationships with many of the multinationals, and just to see, I've been here literally less than 24 hours, but just to see the amount of traffic from all the multinational shipping lines that visit. We also work with the UN agencies like the International Maritime Organization and my good friend Kitak Lim, who's going to address you later. But we also work with other international groups who are clients of the transport modes. Our objective, and we're very proud of this, is to protect workers and improve the quality of life, their safety, and the standards that they can enjoy in the workplace. We build campaigns, we target substandard operators, but we also work very collaboratively with many employers groups. And in particular, our job in this ever-changing world is to make sure wherever you fit in the global economy that you have the rights and representation of working men and women, but also recognising, and particularly in this country, that maritime is very much part of your history. But, of course, workers, they work for money, but they also are entitled to respect and dignity. And it's our job to make sure that happens. We have, through many years, next year will be the 75th anniversary of what we call the Flag of Convenience campaign. And throughout that process, we have built a very strong collaboration for collective bargaining and representation of the seafarers of the world. And it's critical that we're in a position to defend seafarers. And even last year, we collected over $40 million in unpaid wages. I have hopefully a fairly lengthy slot today, so I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey. When we left our Congress in 2018, we set forward very progressive policies about building coalitions around the world. Little did we know that COVID was going to descend on our world and impact in so many challenging ways. And I think governments, and it's fantastic to have so many representatives of your government here today, have challenged to recognise how critical transport workers and the transport industry are to our economies, whether it's delivering energy, whether it's delivering food or personal protection equipment. Throughout this process, we found, without reservation, a new period of cooperation with employers' associations, and cooperation that then empowered us to call on governments to identify transport workers as essential workers and try to build in protections and, frankly, as we go forward, ensure that what we saw, the inability of seafarers to get off ships, the challenge of truck drivers at borders, to be in a position to make sure those things don't happen in the future. And I'll talk a little bit later about the need to supply seafarers. But none more so than the maritime sector, it's critical that we collaborate under the UN system. And the ITF has a long and historical representation at the International Maritime Organization with its headquarters in London. It's critical that we work in collaboration, and I mentioned throughout the pandemic, we worked very closely with the International Chamber of Shipping, probably the closest we've ever worked with a group of employers, trying to protect the freedom of ships to move, but also the ability for seafarers to fly to ships. We have to recognise our labour force is a global labour force. And when you shut down the aviation industry or you shut down your borders, it made it incredibly difficult for shipping companies to function. And if we hadn't have worked in collaboration with the International Maritime Organization and our brothers and sisters at the International Labour Organization, the only tripartite body in the UN system, we would not have been able to face some of those challenges. And I think, particularly as I go through what I would like to see the future relationship with Turkey, that sense of collaboration should give us an opportunity to collaborate together. The ITF in the pandemic period re-evaluated some of our objectives, and we came up with 4 core areas that we believe will not just prepare us for life after the pandemic, but also prepare us to be ready for the challenges that the world brings forward. The first area is, we call it the future of work, but in reality, it's the here and now. The changing face of digitalisation of shipping, the digital platforms that we all have to work on, and the transportation of traditional working practices into this new world. We saw e-commerce, the delivery, the just-in-time deliveries to people's front doors, massively grow. But we have to make sure that we're able to protect the integrity of our traditional industries, so shipping, trucking, warehousing, ports, and be in a position to make sure that whilst technology will make our lives better, it should be done in a sense of cooperation, collaboration, and upskilling. Of course, we all have to look at our workforces. Are they ready for the future? And we believe in the ITF we should be sitting at the tables with employers, with governments, making sure they understand what working men and women would like to receive as their lives and their jobs change. It is critical that we work in collaboration. Probably one of our fundamental issues throughout the lifetime of all unions is about occupational safety and health. And I think we saw, again through COVID, quite how fragile our global supply chains are. And many of our members have come back to us, wherever they fit in the supply chain, and asked us to actively be more engaged in talking with employers and governments about improving the occupational health and safety. And these are things such as well-being in the workplace, stress management, all of these things. Sometimes in transportation, many of our members get sexually harassed or bullied in the workplace, both by passengers and clients. And it's our job to make sure that we're talking in a collaborative sense, how do we protect our people and ensure that they can be safe in the workplace and they know what the rules are, and those rules are respected by all union members, but also employers. It's impossible to talk about the future of shipping without recognition we're at a massive crossroads when it comes to climate. And the reality for all of us is the targets set for 2030 and 2050 may mean substantial change, not may, will mean substantial change in the energy that drives our ships. And again, through the partnership with the ICS, we've been working to address those issues. It's not easy to explain to a seafarer what climate change has got to do with them. But the reality is the skills they'll need to operate the future engine rooms, even the composition of the ships as we know it, as we move from 2030 to 2050, are things that we have to respond to. We believe that we'll need to have 1 trillion, yes, 1 trillion US dollars put into shipping by 2050 to be in a position to decarbonise. That doesn't deal with the 8 trillion, yes, 8 trillion we'll need to put into the global supply chain to make sure whatever the alternative fuels, and it's not completely clear yet what they'll be, are safely transported from manufacturing, creation to ship. And it's critical throughout this transition that, again, we collaborate with government, making sure that the laws are fit for occupational health and safety, with the employers who have to put enormous amounts of money to transition their ships. But we also want to say very earnestly that in the end, maritime is a human business, and the quality and the opportunity for human beings to engage in the conversation is utterly critical. So we have some points. Technological changes cannot be rushed through. They need to be given serious consideration when it comes, such as ammonia and how you transport it, how you make it safe. And we have to recognise that this country has a plethora of ports, highways, infrastructure, and we need to make sure they're all safe and ready to be dealt with. It's critical, as we sadly saw in Jordan earlier this week, that if you do not treat chemicals with the utmost respect, the consequences are devastating. And again, we need to work with governments, nationally and multinationally, at the international level, to drive through what is, let's not underestimate it, an extremely challenging undertaking, particularly when shipping has been the last place to burn off diesel fuels. But we have to do it, and we have to do it in a way that builds a strong and sustainable future, and that it includes diversity, includes more women, and it makes an environment that we can build a safe shipping industry. I've mentioned a few times, and I think it's critical that we recognise that transportation is critical to our societies, but the stress and strain of COVID on supply chains has been quite devastating. And if you look at the numbers of, I think we were at something like 98% efficiency in the ports of the world before COVID, and we're struggling back up to 70%. And that has a direct knock-on impact on people's economies and or jobs in the workplace. But it's critical, and thanks again for our colleagues here and the Turkish ship owners who tried their best to respond to the ability to move seafarers on and off ships. And again, our colleagues at the IMO and ILO were incredibly helpful in making sure that we could get seafarers who went beyond their 11 months of contract home safely. I think COVID, and I'm talking to a room of the converted, has highlighted the importance of shipping to our economies and the vital role that seafarers play in ensuring supply chains work and our economies are sustainable. But it's also brought home the challenges that we exist in a very complex industry, and it's not easy to find solutions. And again, the work of just holding this meeting, bringing an international delegation, but also the subject matters you're discussing today, are critical that we do that in partnership. We saw too many countries, because of the rules put in place by COVID, not respond to the Maritime Labour Convention, not allow seafarers to get medical attention, not allow seafarers to come off the ships. And we have to remember that our seafarers work in the same place with the same crew day after day, and many of their homelands were being ravaged by COVID as well. So it was a very stressful situation. But it's critical that we are able to learn the lessons from COVID. And we see at the moment, and there's many, many good companies in Turkey that collaborate very well with our unions, but there are also still some companies who are struggling with the COVID situation, and we're seeing an increased number of ships abandoned around the world. Just to give you some statistics, we worked very hard to try to secure vaccinations for the seafarers because there were many rules. We lobbied together with the ICS, the World Health Organization, to get allowances for seafarers. We lobbied with national governments to make sure that seafarers were on the essential worker list. But even in May this year, 16% of the 1.4 million seafarers have still not been vaccinated. And we still have, as of the end of May this year, over 50,000 seafarers still beyond their contracts. So it feels like COVID's gone, but for many of the seafarers we represent, it hasn't. 90% of all the traded goods in the world are moved by sea. And this pandemic highlighted, I think, how important transportation and the stakeholders in transportation are to the global economy. And we've also highlighted to the manufacturers of the world and the retailers that we are, and I mean union, employer and government, critical to the process. Maritime workers, wherever they fit, showed resilience, adaptability and reliability. They kept us fed, they kept us clothed, and they kept personal protection equipment arriving when we understood what we needed to ensure. I'm going to talk a little bit now about the Maritime Labour Convention. I'm going to talk a little bit about the unique nature of shipping. When we talk about our partnership with the International Labour Organization, and the point I stress, it's a tripartite model where unions, employers and governments meet together, the work that was done to produce the Maritime Labour Convention is the most powerful labour convention in the world. And that's because of the unique nature and partnership that is built in maritime. But it didn't always work, and we have to reaffirm, and again we're looking at this again with the ICS and our partners in industrial bargaining, IMEC, to ensure that flag states and ship owners understand what's expected of them, but also that we continue to have constructive dialogue. We are extremely concerned when we look towards the future that Turkey hasn't fully ratified the Maritime Labour Convention. And what I'm going to talk to you in the next part of the speech is a conversation about you and the history of this country, maritime trade, and where you should be as we move forward. But it will be impossible for you to continue to develop if you don't ratify the Maritime Labour Convention and you don't modernise your maritime and employment practices. There's a BIMCO study, so that's not an ITF study. There's a study by the industry that estimates somewhere between 1.8, 1.9 million seafarers operate in all ships around the world. You have, although we don't know because they're not registered, over 130,000 seafarers from Turkey itself. And you are a key maritime nation, but you're also a key labour supplier. Based on BIMCO's studies, we anticipate, and I have to say, the fact that we had real challenges for seafarers to get on and off ships. This report was made before that. We estimate that we need nearly 90,000 new officers by 2026, which isn't very far away. And we believe that there is a current shortfall, literally as we stand here, of nearly 27,000 seafarers, officers, not ratings, that we need to put in place to ensure the industry can get back to pre-pandemic levels. We also recognise, as we decarbonise the industry, we need more skilled, multi-skilled men and women to be ready for the future of a zero-carbon shipping industry. And we have to recognise that shipping is competing with other sectors. It's very clear to us that Turkey has a very serious role to play in the future of shipping. But we do need to continue to review the working conditions to stop young men and women leaving the ships because of their COVID experience. We need better promotion of shore-based jobs for our seafarer folk so they can see a long career in what, for me, is an amazing industry. We need more inclusion and diversity, and we must promote women into our industry in a much more forceful way. This is not me complaining to you, it's me sharing our guilt. If I gave you the real number of women in the shipping industry today is 1.3% of all the seafarers. Now that's not good strategic planning. We need more women in our workforce, and we need to find a way to make the industry more attractive. And we believe in the ITF that that's something we can partner with. And again, we have to make sure that the ships are safe and they have the best possible occupational health and safety, and we also look after the mental well-being. Some of our team were in Geneva earlier this year, where they have amended the MLC about providing more free internet communications, and that's part of managing some of the stresses we saw coming through in COVID. I want to just mention, without sounding too self-promoting, the ITF sits on behalf of all the labour global unions and all the unions in the world in the UN Global Compact. The UN Global Compact is the industrial part of the UN, and we're there to represent labour, and we're there to meet with the big multinationals that are clients to shipping and other modes of transport, and retail and manufacturing. And it's critical that in that space, we're also talking about ensuring social dialogue and ensuring workers are protected by collective bargaining agreements, that workers' rights are part of the modern framework when it comes to building a better society, and they must include ILO core labour standards and ILO occupational health and safety standards. We have to make sure in the world at large, and this is an economic question, that we have good social protection and long-term protections for our people. And again, we have to make sure we're in a position to secure good salaries to make sure the industry remains attractive. These fundamental principles, which are predominantly corporate members, is to ensure that we're fit for purpose, that we can respond to these challenges, whether they be COVID, whether they be the war, which is having significant impact on the labour supply of Russian and Ukrainian seafarers. And we see this country, and that's why we're here, as being a vital part of the future when it comes to shipping. This country has a fantastic history as a maritime nation. You sit at the crossroads between two continents, and you have a multicultural, well-educated, diverse population. You've expanded industrially. You've built new opportunities in chemical, food and beverage, and these have helped. I don't think we have all the answers for the economy, and I'm not sure that's exactly, I can help with that, but the reality is your role in the global market is critical. You have become and will continue to be a critical player in the global labour movement, but it's also critical that we bring up the standards to make sure Turkish workers are skilled, but also have the talents and the education to build a stronger, more successful Turkey with good industrial relations. I said at the beginning, and I'll reaffirm it here, that we learnt through COVID we can change more in partnership. And that to me means working with governments, with employers. We have to understand the challenges, each one of the component parts. So what are the challenges for Turkish seafarers? What makes young people pick shipping and not other industries? It's critical that we understand those challenges and we build a labour force, I would suggest, not just for Turkish owners, but also for the global labour market to help fill those spaces with well-educated, young, motivated Turkish workers. It's critical that we evaluate what happened in COVID. We do that in partnership. It's critical that we recognise the challenges we all have to build a safe, sustainable, profitable shipping industry. You and the companies represented here are in a moment where we've seen very high freight rates and we've seen some significant shifts in the way we should hold the global supply chain accountable. But we genuinely believe having good local representation, having strong dialogue and having mutual respect, and can I say the word trust? I've already had one challenging question, I hope there's a few more later, about how do you build that trust? It's vital. And this country has a very strong political leadership, has a very strong geographical position when it comes to the industry, and it's vital that we build a very strong Turkish maritime infrastructure. As we emerge from the crisis and we look to fix our disrupted supply chain, we need to shift to a fairer, greener economy characterised by good jobs, well-skilled, well-educated seafarers, and then the benefits for their contribution will be felt in your society. And it's critical for all of us that we respond to the challenges of climate justice, but that also means social justice for the workers who may be displaced or upskilled as we move further forward. In closing, I want to say, this isn't my first visit to Istanbul. I've seen the country, and we were trying to work out when was the last time I presented to the Turkish Ship Owners Association. We were part of the transition maybe 20 years ago. And sometimes those transitions were built on misunderstandings and a lack of clarity. But it's critical, having come out of COVID, that we build relationships where we can be honest and frank with each other, and we can bring the best of what unions, employers and governments have to ensure that this amazing global industry is fit for the future. And I'm immensely proud to be here today, and I see Turkey as a major player in the future of the shipping industry. I hope you have a fantastic summit. I'm looking forward to the conclusions, and the ITF will be available for you to work in collaboration on any of the issues that you conclude at the end of the summit. Thank you very much.
Sayın Katın'a konuşmalarından dolayı teşekkür ediyoruz ve kendisine bir plaket takdimimiz olacak. Denizcilik Genel Müdürü Sayın Ünal Baylan'ı takdim için sahneye davet ediyorum. Buyursunlar. Sayın Katın ve Sayın Baylan'a teşekkür ediyoruz ve şimdi zirvemiz bir panelle devam edecek. Sevgili katılımcılar, Türk denizcilik sektörü vizyonu, Türk filosunun geliştirilmesi. Dünya taşımacılığının 2010-2020 yıllarındaki yüzdelik dağılımında 2020 yılında deniz yolunun payı %90 olarak gerçekleştirilmiştir. Dış ticaret taşımacılığı, ihracat yüklemesinde en fazla taşınan kargo sıralamasında %38 ile konteyner ve dökme katı yük, %13 ile genel kargo, %8 ile sıvı dökme yük ve %4 araç olarak gerçekleştirilmiştir. Bugün 80 trilyon olan küresel ticaretin 2100 yılında ikiye katlanması beklenmektedir. Milyarlarca metreküplük mal büyüklüğünün taşımacılığı göz önünde bulundurulduğunda sektörel gelişimi desteklemek için yeni adımlar atılması da gerekmektedir. Türk Denizcilik Sektörü Vizyonu, Türk filosunun geliştirilmesi panelinde Türk Denizcilik Sektörü Vizyonu'nu ele alacağız.